As 205/55/16 is the world's most bought tyre size, I thought it was about time I gave this category some love and performed a proper comparison test. As with all my tyre tests, I'll still be testing the limit of grip in both dry and wet to work out how safe the tyres are in emergency situations, but as these tyres are more geared up to the everyday driving, I'll be spending extra time testing the comfort levels you get from the tyres and the noise you get in the cabin. On test, I have 12 of the most popular tyres in this size, including 6 premium tyres, 5 of some of the most loved mid-range tyres on the market, and a budget tyre, just to see if you really do get what you pay for when it comes to tyres. To conduct this test properly, Goodyear have once again lent me their incredible test facility in the south of France, where I'll be able to do the testing in the dry and wet, comfort and noise in very controlled environments to make sure the data is very accurate, because between some of these top level tyres, the differences are very small. I'll also be looking at the subjective handling as well, in case that's something that interests you. So you'll have a good overview of the tyre's mechanical grip in the dry and wet, how comfortable they are, how noisy they are in the cabin, and if you want to push it on down a country road, how much fun they are to drive. With 12 sets of tyres on test, there's going to be a lot of data generated. I'll be going through 130 tyres in the next week. If, when you get to the end of the video, you feel like I've skimmed over some of the information you are interested in, or you just want to view it at a slower pace, I'll leave a link in the description to the Tyre Reviews website where you can click through and go through all the geeky data yourself. Also, I will be factoring in price to this test, and the pricing will come from the Tyre Reviews price comparison, which is often a way of finding very cheap tyres online. So if you're wondering where I got the pricing from, click that link in the description and head over to the website. And finally, before we look at all 12 tyres on test, if you haven't already, please feel free to hit that subscribe button. It means a lot to me. It will really help the channel to continue growing. On test from the premium manufacturers, we have the Bridgestone Turanza T005, the Continental PremiumContact 6, the new Goodyear EfficientGrip Performance 2, the Hankook Ventus Prime 3, the Michelin Primacy 4, and the new Pirelli Cinturato P7 C2. The mid-range tyres are the new BFGoodrich Advantage, the Falken ZE310 ecorun, the Maxxis Perimeter HP5, the Nokian wetproof, and the first ever test of the Uniroyal RainSport 5, with the budget category represented by the Goodride RP28. Holy smoke, to say it's close at the top of dry handling is an understatement. I think I found out why other tyre testers have a spread of tyres from good to bad performance instead of, like me, just picking the best tyres they possibly could find on the market. The 3 best on test were the Goodyear, Continental and Maxxis. All 3 tyres were within 0.05 of a second of each other, so super close on actual raw grip, but they delivered it slightly differently. The Continental and Maxxis were 2 of the best tyres subjectively on test. Very pointy, very darty on the front nose, and you actually got feedback, which for a 16-inch tyre is a welcome thing. The Goodyear, a little bit less feedback and a little bit less dynamic behaviour, but what the Goodyear did that the Goodyear's always good at is it didn't overheat. And I know you're probably not going to track day your 1.4 Golf on a 16-inch wheel, but that's just an important quality that shows that the tyre has potential for good longevity. Falken and Bridgestone were next. The Falken felt like it had a lot of grip, but it had a bit of understeer and it just felt a little bit hard to place, whereas the Bridgestone felt really nice, but it just wasn't quite as fast as the other tyres on test. The Bridgestone, nice balance, a little bit of understeer, but otherwise good. Like, not great, good. The next 3 were the Hankook, Nokian and Pirelli trio. Now, of the 3, the Pirelli was the best dynamically. In fact, the Pirelli was up there with the best dynamically. It was a really nice tyre to drive on. You just couldn't quite match the grip of the very best. Nokian was also a surprise. I've tested the wetproof before and felt it was kind of a soft tyre that wasn't really up to a handling job, but round here felt really positive. A little bit of understeer, but otherwise a nice balance. The Hankook, it felt like it had good grip, but it was a really understeer behaviour and it just wasn't super nice to be throwing around the track, but that's what you get from a 16-inch tyre a lot of the time. The final group of times was Michelin, BFGoodrich and Uniroyal. Now, the Michelin, like the Bridgestone, felt absolutely fine. It was confusing, it wasn't any quicker than it was, because every time I'd finished a lap, I was like, I've done a really good lap, that was a nice lap. Then I'd look at the time and I'd be like, oh, okay, it's an okay time. Confusing tyre, but like really nice to drive on, but just wasn't the quickest. Sadly, couldn't say the same really for the BFGoodrich and Uniroyal. Both of those tyres were the worst subjectively. They offered the less feedback, the slowest steering, and a lot of understeer in both tyres, so hopefully that gets paid back in comfort. The budget, well, the budget was very budget-like. It was the slowest on test, but it wasn't the worst budget I've ever used, and dynamically it was okay, so it's a budget.
Dry braking was again very close and had the Continental leading the way with the budget tyre significantly behind. Next up, we look at the wet performance of the 12 tyres.
Wet handling usually spreads the field a little bit more and it allows you to start seeing differences between the tyres, but this might be a running theme. It was really, really close. The top 6 tyres was split by 0.6 seconds, which is just 1% overall. Once again, the Maxxis was leading the way, posting the fastest lap time and being really good subjectively. It was another tyre that was a joy to drive and had no issues aquaplaning around this circuit. Nokian, Goodyear, Bridgestone and Falken were all within 0.2 or 0.2%. Not 2%, 0.2%. The Nokian was a joy in the wet. Very easy to drive fast, a little bit of understeer, but told you what was going on and had no issues with aquaplaning. The Goodyear and the Bridgestone both felt great to drive, but they started having issues at various parts of the circuit where there was just slightly more water, and then once the car's aquaplaning, you just have to wait and wait on the grip, which meant the overall time was reduced. The Falken, like the Nokian, had no real issues with aquaplaning and it was a very easy tyre to drive fast, so well done to Falken and Nokian for those. Uniroyal was next, and while it absolutely had no issues aquaplaning, being the rain tyre, it did have that understeer again, which was slightly frustrating. Good mechanical grip, no aquaplaning, but it was a bit dynamically numb. The next 2 results were the Michelin and Pirelli. Both these tyres felt like they had good mechanical grip, but they started to struggle a little bit more clearing the standing water. This is something you see from the premium tyres. They're starting to reduce the tread pattern grooves in order to put more rubber down, so when there's not water, or even in shallow water, there's more grip. But when you hit patches of deeper water, you do aquaplane, and in a curve, that means you're waiting and waiting on the car. The surprise of the test, or maybe not the surprise of the test, given what we just said about aquaplaning, was the Conti. This tyre felt like it had excellent mechanical grip, which was confirmed by the wet braking results coming up in a minute, but it was aquaplaning the most out of all the tyres, which meant it couldn't post the lap time that its raw grip has the potential for because of the aquaplaning. Rounding off the field, there was Hankook and BFGoodrich. They might be near the bottom of the group, but they were only 3% or 2 seconds a lap off the best, showing you exactly how close it was. And when you compare this to the budget tyre, it was over 10% off. So there's still a big step between the worst of the good tyres and the budget. And to be fair to this budget, again, dynamically, it wasn't awful and its grip levels were okay. It's not terrible for a budget, but it's just a big old step behind the more premium rivals on this test.
Falken, Uniroyal and Continental all had a significant lead during wet braking, all beating the next best tyre by over 2 metres. Again, Hankook and the budget struggled to stop the car. Now it's time to look at the comfort and noise levels of the tyres.
As I said at the start, I think noise and comfort is very important for this category of tyre, and I've tried to do it more properly than anyone's ever tried to do it before in the past. For noise, most magazines actually give you a drive-by noise score. Now, this is great for the pedestrians on the road, but what it doesn't tell you is how it sounds in the cabin. So, to try and answer the question once and for all, I enlisted Goodyear's help to set up this insanely complicated array of microphones around the car, run the test at night when it's cool enough to run without the air conditioning running, and they coast down on 2 different surfaces from 2 different speeds. You then analyze all the data and really nail down exactly what the ear hears in the cabin and at what pitches. I'm going to put the data on the screen because there's no way I'm remembering all those decibel levels while I'm driving. Comfort is also really tricky to do. In total, I've probably spent about a day just doing comfort testing of these 12 sets of tyres. From all the testing, I found out there are 2 outstanding tyres for comfort, and that is the BFGoodrich and Michelin. If you want a tyre just for low noise levels and good levels of comfort, get the BFGoodrich, but the Michelin's very, very close in both and a much more rounded tyre, as you'll see by the end. Joint third was Goodyear and Nokian. Both tyres offered excellent levels of comfort. The Goodyear in particular was very quiet too, and they both rounded off bumps really nicely, so you didn't get that crashiness into the cabin. Uniroyal, Hankook and Bridgestone finished a strong joint 5th, with Uniroyal and Hankook finally paying back some of that handling deficit we found earlier in the test, and Bridgestone feeling, well, it just felt very Tyre-like. I know that's a weird description, but it was the most Tyre on test. Just did everything Tyre-like. Joint 8th was the sporty handling Continental and Maxxis, and the budget. Now, this is where you start getting a little bit more of the noise and road imperfections through into the cabin. And then the final pair were Falken and Pirelli. Both these tyres felt more thumpy through the cabin. And after finishing the test, I looked at the spec sheets. I found out that these are the only two tyres on test at a 94V. Coincidence? Maybe, but interesting nonetheless.
The rolling resistance test showed an 18% spread between the best and worst, with Bridgestone and Goodyear having a clear advantage ahead of the rest of the tyres. Now it's time to conclude the day and look at the overall rankings.
Now that, I almost said a day, it's been a week of long, stressful days testing, but now the test is over, let's round up the results. Now, there's one thing I haven't discussed yet, which is very important for this test, but very difficult to do, and that's wear. I would love to do wear testing, but to do wear testing properly, you can't just look at the tyres that have come off the cars, because the wear we put them through on track is nothing like the real world and it doesn't correlate. Nor can you really use wear machines, because sometimes you get funny results, which isn't fair. So the way you actually wear tyres for wear testing is you have a car for each set of tyres, and then you have a driver for each car, and then you have to drive the tyres for 15,000 kilometers while rotating the tyres on each car to take out the car variances and the drivers between the cars. It's so expensive. But we do have some data to look at from the Tyre Reviews website, from other tests, from people like AutoBuild and TÜVs. Also, with this much data on test, the final order of results can change depending on your priorities of weighting. So I've weighted this in how I think these tyres should be weighted for the everyday driver. That is, 50% of the score weighting is on wet handling, 35% is on dry, 7.5 on value, which is rolling resistance and price, and 7.5 on comfort, which is obviously comfort and noise levels. But head over to the Tyre Reviews website so you can make up your own mind on what tyre is best for you, because I can only give you one conclusion. But along the way, I'm going to recommend which tyre is good at what, even if they're a little bit further down the list. So the bottom two in test. You probably won't be surprised if you've watched the video all the way through to this point. It's going to be the Goodride. And you know what? It's not the worst budget tyre in the world, but it's not a great tyre when compared to all these tyres. It behaves as a tyre, but it has longer wet braking, has average comfort, so perhaps it should be called average ride instead of good ride. And it just generally wasn't the best tyre. So it might be tempting to save £6 a tyre to get the budget tyre, but it's really not. If you do want to save money and don't want to spend, there's this, it's the Hankook Ventus Prime 3. Now, Hankook are going to be disappointed with this tyre, and it really struggled in the two braking categories, but it's the cheapest tyre on test, ignoring this, and there's a reason for that. The Ventus Prime 3 has already been replaced at time of this, or maybe it's just about to be replaced depending on when the video comes out, with the Ventus Prime 4, which is going to be a significant step forward. I'm really looking forward to testing the Ventus Prime 4. Don't write off Hankook. They are now a premium manufacturer. They just haven't done so well in this test. Okay, this is already where tyres started getting very good. The next group of tyres is Pirelli, BFGoodrich, Maxxis, Michelin and Bridgestone. The Pirelli, while it's finishing in 9th, it was very good in dry braking and had low levels of noise, and it was nice on the handling tracks as well. However, it had a firm ride, high rolling resistance, and it's quite an expensive tyre to buy. The BFGoodrich, this is the tyre you pick if you just want comfort. Quietest tyre on test, the most comfortable, the most compliant, but didn't have that sporty dynamic handling, and it was quite average in dry braking. Now the Maxxis, this is a tyre that would finish a lot higher if this was my test for my preferences, because I preference dry handling over wet braking, but that's probably not for everyone. The Maxxis was an excellent handling tyre in both the dry and wet, and had very good resistance to aquaplaning. It was let down by its wet braking, low levels of comfort and pretty high rolling resistance, but this is the tyre that I'm going to start recommending for people that keep asking me, hey, I've got a 15-inch or a 16-inch wheel, I don't want to spend too much money, but I want the sportiest handling tyre. It's this, the Maxxis, I feel. Really good value tyre. Next up, the Michelin. The Primacy 4, it didn't have any major drawbacks. It did really well in each category, but wasn't outstanding, but didn't really add up any negativity. And it's a really, really nice tyre to drive on. So for comfort bias people, it's great. The other thing with Michelin tyres, with Michelin will tell you, is they usually last the longest, so the wear will be excellent, but Michelin have an emphasis on total life performance, but it's something I really want to test in the future. And the Bridgestone, Well, very good wet and dry handling and the lowest rolling resistance on test. It was just let down a little bit by its braking. Now, we're getting close to the top and we're only 2% off in total, the very best tyres. So either one of these tyres would be a really good option. It's the Nokian and the Uniroyal. Now the Nokian had excellent wet handling and was very good in both wet and dry braking. The Uniroyal, well, this tyre's a bit of a conundrum because it wasn't my favourite on test, but the data speaks for itself. Subjectively, it wasn't great. And in the dry, it just felt kind of inert and gave up its grip early. But it excelled in aquaplaning. It was the best on test and was very good in braking. So if you live in a climate where handling isn't really an importance to you, but you do come across very deep puddles, the rain tyre with its unique tread pattern, this is the one to have. And here are my top 3. Remember at the start of the conclusion, I said, depending on what your priorities were, it changed the order. Well, pretty much no matter what my priorities were, these 3 were always in the top, just sometimes in different orders. It's the Falken, Goodyear and Continental. All 3 of these tyres are amazing and there's so little in it. However, each tyre does have its strengths and weaknesses. The Falken, best in wet braking, short dry braking, and very good in the dry and wet. And in previous years, I found the Falken to be quite a soft tyre, but maybe because of the construction and 94V, this thing is a good handling tyre as well. Drawbacks, not the most comfortable tyre on test and has quite high rolling resistance, but it's well priced, so that kind of balances it out. And the final 2 are Goodyear and Continental. These tyres were almost inseparable at the top, but they do things in slightly different ways. The Goodyear is an excellent all-round tyre. It was great in dry handling, great in wet handling, good levels of comfort, low rolling resistance, just a solid all-rounder. But it was let down by wet braking. If it was slightly improved, it would have been a clear winner. The Continental is the braking master. It aced both dry and wet braking and was great in dry handling and dynamically one of the best feeling tyres on test. That comes at an expense of reduced comfort. And both these tyres were joint 10th in aquaplaning. So that's another area that cost them points, but the Continental aquaplaned a little bit more on wet handling, which reduced its time there. But both these tyres have excellent mechanical grip. The Falken's a great tyre. In fact, I think any of the top 6 or 7 tyres are really worth a recommendation. But if you're looking for the very best of the best, it's one of these 3 and probably one of these 2. Well, congratulations if you've made it this far. I'm surprised I have. It's been a huge amount of work. I hope you found it useful and I hope you've enjoyed it. Any comments or questions, ask below in the comments. I always try and answer everything I can and I'm always looking for suggestions of what to do in the future. If you've enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up. As always, if you haven't subscribed, please do. It really helps me along the way do more of these really difficult, expensive tests in the future. And as always, safe motoring.